Warning, this podcast contains descriptions of murder, torture and abuse. As a result, it may not be suitable for everybody. Leicester, England. Famous for its red Leicester and Stilton cheese. Inventor of blue tack and package holidays. And the Foxes, football's most unlikely Premier League winners. This week on Hometown Murders, listen to the case of Warren Slaney, the hot dog murders, Colin Pitchfork and the first DNA fingerprint test, and the green bicycle murder case. The Hot Dog Wars. In August 1990, Gary Thompson, 27, and John Weston, 29, were shot dead at a house in Oadby, Leicester. Warren Slaney, 23, was jailed for life for the crime, which became known as the Hot Dog Murders because Thompson owned a string of fast food vans and made enemies with a number of rival vendors. Slaney's co-accused, Terence Burke, claimed the shooting was a bungled robbery linked to an insurance fraud, but it had evidence which convicted Slaney. Slaney has always claimed he is innocent, and he said that he was at a family party at the time of the shooting, around 2 a.m. in the morning. 9 people said he was at the party until at least 4:30 a.m. His supporters also point out that eyewitnesses said the killers were both over 6 feet tall, with Slaney only 5 feet 8 inches. There have been claims over the years that hit on Thompson was actually ordered by Ramsey Sherrick, an Iraqi-born nightclub owner who spent time in prison for drug dealing. Investigating police would claim that they were directly involved in an armed robbery that had backfired. As a result, Warren Slaney is now facing life imprisonment. Slaney and his supporters claim that physical descriptions given by eyewitnesses do not match Slaney's appearances. The perpetrators were over 6 feet tall, and as previously, Thompson was only 5'8". The second witness said that it was 6'6". They were broad, heavy built, dark tanned, big moustache, and had a hat with a ponytail, again, which doesn't match the witness statements or others linked to the Slaney slaying. At the time of the shooting, Slaney was 5'8", white, clean shaven, very short hair, and weighed between 9.5 and 10 stone. Again, this clashes with what the witnesses said. 9 witnesses attended to Slaney being at a party till 4:30 a.m. on the morning of the murders. A crucial prosecution witness testified in court that she'd falsified her statement to the police. This statement implicated Warren Slaney directly with the robbery. The man who disposed of the gun admitted that Warren had nothing to do with the murders. The statement was not used in court. Slaney was accused of firing the Beretta handgun, which killed 2 men. The shots fired displayed a great degree of accuracy. Warren Slaney had previously suffered hand injuries which resulted in insertion of metal plates. He he would not have been capable of such an act because he could not have been capable of pulling the trigger. Medical evidence at the trial was never used by the defence. There is no forensic evidence to link Slaney to the murders, although the police searched his home 4 times. Even though these clashes withstood, Warren Slaney was sentenced to a double life sentence in 1992 for the murders of Gary Thompson and John Weston. An application was made to the Criminal Cases Review Commission in 1999. Slaney's case, whilst initially refused, is being re-examined following recent discovered new evidence. The victims, Warren Slaney, who was supposedly killed, were hot dog tycoon Gary Thompson as an employee John Weston. All 3 were involved in a fast food chain. Doubt was cast when Russ Spring campaign support worker for miscarriage of justice operation who'd been working with the Slaney family said, quote, "Warren Slaney has always insisted that he was innocent, that he took no part in the robbery or the murders." He said there were several areas that cast doubt on the conviction. There will always be the matter of having 9 alibi witnesses, and there was a description given by eyewitnesses at the murder that didn't fit Warren Slaney, end quote. And now over the years, other witnesses have come forward which cast further doubts on the conviction. In August 1995, leave to appeal was sought at Guildhall, Middlesex, on the grounds of incompetent defence. 2 weeks before the hearing, Slaney's defence solicitor announced that his papers for the defence had been stolen. On the day of the hearing, the solicitor had to explain in the dock to 3 appeal judges why he neglected to inform anyone of the theft. They gave the defence 4 weeks to get the papers in order. 9 months later, the solicitor was still unprepared. In July 1996, the court took just 20 minutes to dismiss the appeal. As of this time, Slaney is still in prison and the campaign to free him still goes on. The next hometown murder is Colin Pitchfork, born 23rd of March 1960. He's a convicted murderer and rapist. He was given the first person convicted of murder based on DNA fingerprinting evidence and the first to be caught as a result of mass DNA screening. Pitchfork raped and murdered 2 girls in neighbouring Leicester villages, the first in Narborough in November 1983 and the second in Enderby in 1986. He was arrested on the 19th of September 1997 and sentenced to life imprisonment on the 22nd of January 1988 after admitting both murders. Pitchfork lived in New Bold-Verdon, attending school in Market Bosworth in Desford until his marriage in 1981 to a social worker, at which he lived in Littlethorpe. The Pitchforks had 2 sons. Before his marriage, Pitchfork had been convicted of indecent exposure and been referred for therapy at Carlton Hayes Hospital, Narborough. Pitchfork had obtained work in Hampshire's bakery in 1976 as an apprenticeship. He continued to work there until his arrest for the murders. He became particularly skilled as a sculptor of cake decorations and hoped eventually to start his own cake decorating business. According to his supervisor, he was a good worker and timekeeper, but he was moody and he couldn't leave women alone. He was always chatting them up. On the 21st of November 1983, 15-year-old Linda Mann took a shortcut on her way home from babysitting, and instead of taking a normal route, she did not return, and her parents and neighbours spent the night searching for her. The next morning, she was found raped and strangled on a deserted footpath known locally as Black Pad. Using forensic science techniques available at the time, police linked a semen sample taken from her body to a person with type A blood, an enzyme profile that matched only 10% of males. With no other leads or evidence, the case was left open. On the 31st of July 1986, a second 15-year-old girl, Dawn Ashworth, left her home to visit a friend's house. 2 days later, her body was found in a woodland area near a footpath called 10 Pound Lane. She had been beaten, savagely raped and strangled to death. The modus operandi matched that of the first attack, and a semen sample revealed the same blood type. The prime suspect was Richard Buckland, a local 70-year-old youth with learning difficulties who revealed knowledge of Ashworth's body and admitted to Ashworth's crime under questioning, but denied the first murder. In 1985, Alex Jeffries, a genetics researcher at the University of Leicester, first developed DNA profiling along with Peter Gill and Dave Werrett of the Forensic Science Service. Using this technique, Jeffries compared semen samples from both murder victims against a blood sample from Buckland and conclusively proved that both girls were killed by the same man, but not that of Buckland. Buckland became the first person to have his innocence established by DNA fingerprinting. Leicester Constabulary and the FSS then undertook an investigation in which more than 5,500 local men were asked to volunteer blood or survivor samples. This took 6 months and no matches were found. On the 1st of August 1987, one of Pitchfork's colleagues at the bakery, Ian Kelly, revealed to fellow workers in a Leicester pub, the Clarendon, that he'd taken the blood test while masquerading as Pitchfork. Pitchfork told Kelly that he could not give blood under his own name because he was already given blood while pretending to be a friend of his who had wanted to avoid being harassed by police because of a youthful conviction for burglary. A woman was overheard the conversation, reported it to the police. On the 19th of September 1987, Pitchfork was arrested. During subsequent questioning, Pitchfork admitted to exposing himself to more than 1,000 women, a compulsion that began in his early teens. He later progressed to sexual assault, then to strangling his victims in order to protect his identity. He pleaded guilty to the 2 rapes and murders in addition to another indecent sexual assault and was sentenced to life imprisonment. The Lord Chief Justice at the time of the sentence said, quote, "From the point of view of the safety of the public, I doubt if he should ever be released," end quote. The Secretary of State set a minimum term of 30 years in 2009. Pitchfork's sentence was reduced on appeal to 28 years. In April 2009, a sculpture that Pitchfork had created in prison was exhibited at the Royal Festival Hall, bringing the music to life, depicting an orchestra and choir. The sculpture was exhibited as a part of a venture by Leicester Trust, having been purchased by the Festival Hall for £600. Following outrage in the papers and from victim advocate groups, it was removed from display. On the 22nd of April 2016, the Parole Board for England and Wales heard Pitchfork's case for early release on parole. Pitchfork's advocates presented evidence of his improving character, noting that Pitchfork had furthered his education to degree level and become expert at the transcription of printed music into Braille for the benefit of the blind. The families of the victims of Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth opposed his release on parole. On the 29th of April 2016, The parole board announced that Pitchfork's petition for parole had been denied, but they then issued a recommendation that Pitchfork be moved to an open prison. In June 2016, Michael Gove, then serving as Justice Secretary, agreed with the board's recommendation, and at some point prior to the 8th of January 2017, Pitchfork was moved to an undisclosed open prison. The parole board denied parole again in 2018. He may be eligible for parole again in 2020. On the 3rd of May 2018, Pitchfork was denied parole. The parole board said Pitchfork was eligible for further review within 2 years. Linda's man's mother said the parole board had, quote, listened to us before the murderer, end quote. In 2019, it emerged Pitchfork would be released from open prison on unsupervised days out. It had been widely expected that Pitchfork could be approaching final release from prison on parole later in 2020. In November 2018, Pitchfork was spotted walking around Bristol, so it was assumed that he'd been moved to HMM Prison Leyhill in Gloucestershire. The last hometown murders is the Green Bicycle case. A British murder investigation and subsequent trial pertaining to the fatal shooting of Bella Wright near the village of Little Stretton, Leicester, on the 5th of July 1919. Wright was killed by a single bullet wound to the face. The case took its name from the fact that on the evening of her death, Wright was seen cycling in the company of a man riding a green bicycle. Roland Light, a 33-year-old mathematics teacher, is considered the prime suspect in Wright's murder. Light did not come forward in response to an extensive media appeal to trace a man matching his description seen on the green bicycle, and he is known to have made attempts to dispose of both his bicycle and revolver holster in a canal following her death. Upon his arrest, Light initially denied, then admitted to being in the company of Wright shortly before her death, although he consequently denied killing her. He was defended in court by Sir Edward Marshall Hall QC, who largely based his defence on the lack of motive for Wright's death. Marshall Hall obtained Light's acquittal. The case would prove to be one of the UK's most celebrated and controversial murder cases of the 20th century, with opinions varying among authors as to Light's guilt and the actual motive behind the crime, should her death not have been the result of misadventure. The case has been described as the most fascinating murder case of the century. Annie Bella Wright was born on the 14th of July 1897. She was the eldest of 7 children, born to an illegitimate agricultural labourer and his wife. She lived in a thatched cottage in the village of Stroughton, Leicester, just 4 miles from the city centre. Wright had attended school until the age of 12 before beginning work as a domestic servant, subsequently obtaining a job as a rubber hand at Bates & Co. St Mary's Mills, a rubber factory in Leicester, approximately 5 miles from her home. She regularly travelled to work on her bicycle. At the time of her death, she was working the late shift at the factory, and as such, in the summer of 1919, was known to have cycled between the villages and hamlets around Little Stretton to perform errands or visit acquaintances in the late afternoon hours. At the time of her death, Wright, described as a girl with good looks and a good character, was 21-year-old and engaged to be married to a Royal Navy stoker named Archie Ward, who served on HMS Diadem, a training ship in Portsmouth. She is known to have had at least one other suitor and to have told her mother of an officer who had fallen in love with her. This may have been Ronald Wright, although he denied this supposition in court. Roland Vivian Light was born on the 19th of October 1885, the son of a wealthy civil engineer who managed a Coville colliery and reportedly also an inventor of plumbing devices. According to a prosecution brief from the murder trial, Light was expelled from Oakham School in 1902 at the age of 17 for lifting little girls' clothes over her head. The same brief states in his 30s he attempted to seduce a 15-year-old girl and admitted to engaging in improper conduct with an 8-year-old girl. Light was a graduate of University of Birmingham, where he graduated as a civil engineer before gaining employment as a draftsman at the Derby Works of Midland Railway in November 1906. He would be fired from this firm in August 1914, suspected of setting a fire in a cupboard and drawing indecent graffiti in a lavatory. Light was later dismissed from employment at a farm, accused of setting fire to haystacks. In May 1910, Light purchased a green BSA folding bike from Autumn Bros in Derby. This bicycle was distinctive green colour with an uncommon coaster brake. At approximately the same time, he became a member of Buxton-based Territory Company of the Royal Engineers. Following the outbreak of the First World War, Light underwent training at Chatham, Newark and Ripon. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant in February 1915 and before being deployed to the Western Front. Light relinquished his commission in the Royal Engineers on the 1st July 1916 on the suggestion of his commanding officer. He returned to the ranks as a gunner in the Honourable Artillery Company. He was court-martialed in 1914 for forging move orders. After 3 years of active service, Light was classified as suffering from severe cell shock and partial deafness and sent back to England to undergo psychiatric treatment. Following recuperation at several army hospitals in England, Light returned to live with his parents in Highfield Street, Leicester. He was demobilised in January 1919 and was later claimed to have been sent home a broken man. On the 21st September 1916, Light's father died in an apparent accident, although his death has been suggested to have been suicide. Light's mother explained the possible suicide resulted from the father's concern for his son's safety as he served on the Western Front. By all accounts, Wright and Light met by chance on the 5th of July 1919 at around 6:45 p.m. as she rode her bicycle to the village of Gorby, where her uncle George Measures resided. According to Light's testimony at his trial, as he rode his bicycle towards the crossroads where Gorby Lane crosses Horton Lane, he observed a young woman bending over her bicycle, and she raised her head in his direction as he approached her, asking him if he had a spanner in his possession to help tighten a loose freewheel on her bicycle. He did not have one in his possession, but did what he could to resolve the problem. Having learned in their brief conversation of Wright's intended destination of Gorby, Light offered to accompany her on her journey, an offer she accepted. Light accompanied Wright to the cottage of her uncle in nearby Gorby before waiting for her outside the premises. En route, the two of them observed by several independent witnesses. The later uncle informed officers he liked neither the looks nor the mannerisms of Light, and that his niece had informed him she had only encountered this individual that evening, stating, quote, "Oh, him, I don't really know him at all. He's been riding alongside me for a few miles, but he isn't bothering me at all. He's just chatting about the weather," end quote. Although Wright remarked to her uncle that Light had behaved like a perfect stranger in her company just before leaving his cottage, she jokingly informed him, quote, "I hope he doesn't get too boring," before adding, "I shall try and give up the slip," end quote. When Wright exited her uncle's cottage and approached her bicycle, Light was overheard greeting her with the remark, quote, "Bella, you've been a long time. I thought you'd gone the other way," end quote. The two rode away from Measure's cottage at approximately 8:50 p.m. According to Light's subsequent testimony, when the two approached a junction beyond Kings Norton, Wright informed him she would have to bid goodbye to him at this stage, as her intended route was to the left. He then claimed to have proceeded directly back to Leicester via Staunton and Avington. Approximately 30 minutes later, after Wright and her companion had ridden away from Measure's cottage, Wright's body was found on Gartree Road, part of Via Dana's Roman Road, by a farmer named Joseph Cowell. Her body was discovered alongside her bicycle, and her face was extensively blooded, with deep gouge marks visible on her cheeks and jaw. Surmising the girl may have run off the road by a motorist, Cowell incidentally induced that she had fallen from her bicycle and fatally injured herself. Cowell proceeded to nearby Great Glen to report his discovery to the local policeman, Constable Alfred Hall, who phoned a doctor in Bilston. Dr. Williams arrived at Hall's residence and the trio returned to Little Stretton, where the doctor gave instructions that the girl's body be moved to a nearby unoccupied house upon Cowell's trap. At the scene, PC Hall later found what he described as, quote, "smears of blood on the top bar of the field gate," end quote, although he discovered no human footprints on either side of the gate. Nonetheless, a dead carrion crow was discovered in a field close to the gate. Dr. Williams had also made a cursory candlelight examination of the scene before ordering Wright's body to be moved to the unoccupied house, having agreed with Cowell's initial assumption she had died in a simple bicycle accident, dying from a combination of blood loss and a head injury. Not accepting this explanation, PC Hall returned to the scene where the body had been discovered at 6 a.m. the following day to search for any signs of foul play. A careful search discovered a .455 caliber bullet 17 feet from where Wright's body had lain, slightly embedded in the ground by the imprint of a horse's hoof, which had not yet been removed from the scene. He proceeded to unoccupied house and washed the congealed blood off the face of the corpse, finding a single entry wound beneath the left eye. Informed of Hall's discovery, Dr. Williams and another doctor performed a full post-mortem upon the body, discovering the victim had been shot once beneath the left eye from a distance of about 6 or 7 feet, and the bullet had exited the rear of her skull. The dead girl was identified by relatives as Bella Wright. An inquest into her death returned a verdict of murder by person or persons unknown. Police inquiries revealed nobody except Wright and a riding companion had been in the vicinity of Gartree Road at the time of her death. Several people had seen a riding companion. Investigators were able to obtain a detailed description of this individual, who was described as being between 35 and 40 years of age, with a broad, full face and between 5'7" and 5'9" in height, wearing a grey suit, grey cap, collar, tie and black boots. The Chief Constable of Leicester Police issued appeals in both the local and national press, urging this man to come forward and assist with their inquiries. Appeals proved unsuccessful. Checks on all premises where bicycles were bought, sold or repaired for distinctive green bicycles also failed. A Leicester bicycle repairman named Harry Cox informed police the previous day he had repaired a bicycle matching that description. Cox also informed police the man riding his bicycle had remarked to him on his intention to go for a ride on the country on the very day. Light would later claim to have not known about Wright's death until he had read a Leicester Mercury article on the 8th of July. According to this evidence, he realised the dire predicament he was in and worried over the matter for some time before deciding to do nothing beyond removing his bicycle where he normally stored it in the attic. He claimed to have failed to come forward in response to the police and media appeals to avoid worrying his ailing mother. However, in October 1919, Light took his bicycle from the attic before proceeding to file off the serial numbers from the frame. He took the bicycle to Upperton Road Bridge in Leicester, where he first detached a rear wheel and then continued dismantling the bicycle. Each section except the rear wheel with his coaster brake was thrown in the River Soar, and that witnessed by a labourer named Samuel Holland, who'd walk into his night shift at a nearby mill. On the 23rd of February 1920, when Enoch Whitehouse was guiding a horse-drawn barge laden with coal along River Soar. This is where the barge snagged the frame of the green bicycle, bringing it to the surface of the canal. Light was arrested on the 4th of March 1920 at Dean Close School in Cheltenham, where he had scored a position teaching mathematics 2 months previously. He was brought to Leicestershire to be charged with the murder of Light. Light emphatically denied murdering Bella Wright or meeting Wright on that date. He initially claimed that he never owned a green bicycle. He was identified by eyewitnesses as the individual who'd been riding alongside Wright on the evening of her death, including her uncle. Cox also identified Light from a police identity parade as being the person who had repairs conducted on the distinctive green bicycle on the day of Bella Wright's death. On the 19th of March, additional pieces of evidence were found. An army pistol holster, conclusively identified as being issued to Light, and a dozen live .455 caliber bullets were then dredged from the same canal in the sections where the bicycle had been retrieved. The bullets were found to be precisely matching that the spent bullet found at the crime scene. The trial of Roland Light opened in Leicester Castle on the 8th of June 1920. The prosecution contention was that a mile west of Gorby, for unknown reasons, Wright had fled from Light, panicked and headed south on an inferior road that was possible route home, but not the shortest one. Light took an alternative route with intentions to ambush her and laid in wait at a gate where he shot her once before fleeing from the scene. To support this, eyewitnesses and other individuals were introduced to testify as to having seen Light in the company of Wright on the evening of her murder. His ownership of the bicycle and his later efforts to both remove identifying marks and dispose of the bicycle, revolver holster and bullets of the same calibre. Furthermore, upon his arrest, Light had proceeded to tell the police numerous lies until confronted with either proof or inconsistencies in his claim. Two girls, Muriel Ninny, 14, and Valerie Caven, 12, would also testify for the prosecution that approximately 3 hours before Light had encountered Wright, he had pestered them as they rode their bicycles close to Wright's body, where it was subsequently found. At his own insistence and on the advice of his barrister, Light opted to testify as an own defence. In the testimony, Light conveyed himself in a well-spoken demeanour. He readily admitted to having lied to the police upon his arrest, before essentially admitting that everything testified to by other witnesses presented at the trial, but his possessions of the service revolver and Wright's killing, claiming they had parted company at a junction close to King's Norton, soon after she had left her uncle's cottage in his company. On cross-examination, Light admitted that the holster, bullet and bicycle recovered in the canal was his, but claimed he disposed of these items in panic. He admitted that as an officer in the army, he had owned a Webley Scott revolver. However, he claimed that it had been posted overseas. He had taken the revolver with him, but not the holster, and that he'd become a casualty. All of his belongings had been left in a casualty clearing station in France in 1918. Overall, Light's version of events as he presented them to the court could not be contradicted or disproved in any detail. Despite being subjected to 5 hours of cross-examination, he did not contradict himself on a single occasion. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before returning a verdict of not guilty. This verdict on the 11th of June was cheered by many spectators was in the courtroom. Bella Wright was buried in the churchyard of St Mary and All Saints, Stoughton, on the 11th of July 1990. Following his acquittal, Light returned to live with his mother in Leicester, where he initially maintained a somewhat reclusive lifestyle. For a time, he assumed the name Leonard Estelle. He was fined in February 1920 for registering under a false name at a hotel where he'd been staying with a woman. In 1928, Light was living in Lensden-on-Sea on the Isle of Shepney, Kent. In 1934, he married widow Lillian Leicester. Ronald Light died on the 15th of May 1975 at the age of 89. His body was cremated at Leicester Crematorium near Ashford, and his ashes were scattered in the crematorium's garden of remembrance. Light had no children of his own, and his stepdaughter had no notion of Light's trial or acquittal until after his death. Thank you for everybody who's listened to this episode. This episode has been researched, written and hosted by me, Andrew Knight. Sound, music and editing has been provided by Harry Edmondson. Make sure you subscribe to the show anywhere where you listen to your podcast. This allows the episode to be downloaded automatically as soon as it's released. Please reach out to us on the social media. We're at Hometown Murders on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. Please support the show by leaving a 5-star rating or a review. It really does help.